Hey, and welcome to the Weed Out, where we weed out the nonsense and find the ghouls in our backyard. I'm Spencer Fox Peterson, and I'm here with my partner as always.
Hi everyone, I'm Joanna Maybooty.
Well, uh, Today we're doing a chat with a good friend of ours, Laura Saylor of the Workingers Party of Massachusetts. We're going to be discussing abolition and some specific truly awful brutality and murder cases of police in our backyard. So this is a true weed out episode. We're going to be talking about an institution that is robbing us of wonderful flowers and plants every day, choking out our fellow citizens. So the weed out name is picked on purpose, and this story we're going to discuss with Laura and her journey in general with abolition and political organizing. Hopefully at this end of this episode, you will have some righteous indignation burned into you, because we like to pat ourselves in the back here in Massachusetts, saying we're not as bad as Florida, but I mean, the bar is really fucking low. So that's the whole point of doing the show. It's the whole point of all the other people we like to highlight on this show. So before we get into it, I guess, Joanna, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited Laura's here, not because I enjoy this topic at all, but I want people to know Sandra Birchmore's name, and I want people to know the names of the officers and what happens when you put a bunch of police officers potentially with middle school students. So I'm doing good, but I'm really excited to dive in because again, please remember Sandra Birchmore's name, and I just want I want our listeners to really think about this and really just focus on the details and hopefully learn something along the way.
And Laura, how are you today?
I am doing great today. Thank you. I want to thank you for having me on the podcast. I really am happy to talk about. I want to keep Sandra's name out there. I think the more people that know what happened to Sandra, the better. And I am very grateful and thankful that you have me on tonight. So thank you. And I'd also like to talk about, other things, murder going on, being perpetrated by local police
Yeah,
in our
and murder.
suburban
It's
area.
not it's not just murder either. It's murder by paper cuts. On top of that, we're all being robbed, and that's important to bring up, the fact that we're being robbed. I mean, a lot of, I think, politically, that language travels, especially if you can back up with facts, which we sure can. I mean, the police, even when they're trying to clear their name, tell on themselves. It's
Yeah,
all
they do.
undoing the propaganda training that we've been so primed in the modern capitalist world. It's not just America. So this could apply to, listen, this, if you're in France, listen in. You're being inundated with propaganda too, and it doesn't matter where you're at. um,
That's completely true, Spencer. And the propaganda bit that you just brought up is so true.
well, we see it in
Right,
how they
just
different
yesterday,
stories. You know,
even with one of these stories that I'm going to talk about tonight, the woman Marianne Griffiths, who was murdered by Easton police on Sunday. On Monday, they trotted out a really ridiculous propaganda story about a girl in Coventry, I believe, which, people will say, oh, Rhode Island, it's a different state. It's only like 10 minutes from here. We get Rhode Island news. The cops all hang out with each other. Um, they did a propaganda story about this young girl who wanted to know if Santa was real, and the Coventry police, solved the case for her, showing this girl with this cop. And I was like, this is just like nauseating. They brought up the propaganda 2 weeks ago when the Tyree Nichols story broke. And then when Marianne was murdered, they come up with, oh, the Coventry police solved the case for the 10-year-old who wanted to know if Santa Claus was real. It's really quite nauseating.
well, there's we're already off track of the weed out, as you can see, but because it's never ending. But the talk about blatant propaganda. There's people, you can find this stuff on the internet. People are taking notes and backing it up with receipts. There's like less than 24 hours after a highly publicized police brutality case like Tyree Nichols 2 weeks ago in Memphis. They will Sinclair, which is they run a lot of companies like that, run things like WWLP News or WCVB Boston, like these mid-market TV show channels with a website. Usually they're owned by a parent company, and one of the biggest ones is Sinclair, and it's basically Fox News prepackaged light. And without fail, after one of these major things, a story of ducklings are saved, specifically ducklings. It's a very strange go-to. Somebody has a fetish for ducklings, like that. They think that is the pinnacle of cuteness and disarming. So yeah, anybody listening at home, if you're curious about that, you can just look for it on TikTok, or I'm sure somebody has a blog about it somewhere. But I've seen a lot on TikTok and Twitter, and there's receipts. It's uncanny, and it goes out on like the 50 channels. The package is the same, the anchors are just different, but it's the same script, the same package, the same stock photos. It's gross. Anyways, we're here to talk about Sandra Birchmore, which is been covered by other podcasts. So there is some national buzz on it. Like, there are people paying attention that have been paying attention, but the real concerning issue is this thing has been going on, and it's complicated, and Laura is a little more intimately knowledgeable on it. That's why we're having her on. The story, they're trying to wait us out. It's the whole point of pushing, appeals and arbitration and all the things that the cops get of being in a really powerful union. That's one way they slow down the process. And then hopefully we forget, or a new tragedy happens, a 9/11, whatever, and then just people's focus. I mean, we focused on George Floyd for 3 months, but it's been pretty dead since then, essentially. I mean, in my opinion. So with the Sandra Birchmore case, I would love to hear you just give us a quick, first synopsis of the story, and then I'm sure we'll have questions. So Laura, please tell us.
I am happy to do that. Sandra Birchmore was a young woman who died in 2021. She died under tragic circumstances, and her life was just, how do I put this? She had a rough home life. Sandra had, didn't have a present father. Her mother died when she was a teenager. She had moved around a lot. She had a lot of issues as a child. So her mother thought, I'm going to put her in this police explorers program run by the town of Stoughton, Mass. She seems to be into, liking the cops and the military. This young girl, let me get her into that. Got her into that. Unbeknownst to her, the officer who ran the program, Officer Devine, had previously run an after-school program and had faced complaints, and was actually demoted from assistant chief to like a patrol officer. He was demoted quite a bit for inappropriate behavior with young girls. In that, he gets demoted, and the chief at the time, who's now a chief on the Cape, decided he'd be great to run an explorers program. The explorers programs are programs that are technically through the Boy Scouts, and like with a lot of these police mentorship programs and athletic leagues, the sponsorship isn't through the actual police department. It's usually through some kind of outside NGO. so that they can avoid any kind of accountability is what that turns into. Because when you research the issue, a lot, these abuse of children, and it's not just girls, but children in general, is ubiquitous through all these programs. It's really bad. They have a very high rate of this.
I was a Boy Scout, and
Pardon?
I was a Boy Scout, and I'm familiar with the Explorers program because we used to meet at the same space. And I was also in the Catholic Church until I was 18 as an altar boy. So I'm quite familiar with the idea of that they find these people in these positions of power that have red flags, and then they get trusted again. They love people that are easy targets. So people that don't.
Sandra was an easy target from the time she was a young girl. And what really breaks my heart is her mom, who's since passed.
Oh, goodness. Was
so grateful for them giving her something to feel a part of, that like she wrote this big thank you letter. This Officer Divine's a hero. And the whole time they were grooming and abusing Sandra and passing her around to other cops and military recruiters and their friends. And it's just, she had all of the traits of somebody who's been abused from the time they were young into adulthood. She wound up pregnant by one of the officers. 4 of the officers were let go by Chief McNamara over this.
And so they were in her life then, though, just to get for the audience, like, so they were in her life from potentially when she was young, like in middle school.
Like 13 to the time she was 23.
Because I saw that when she died was 23. Yeah. So these officers, some of them potentially, the one that she is pregnant by, stayed in her life as well.
All of them did.
For that long. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. They were her life. That was her life. When she died, she was pregnant, and she's pregnant with one of their children. The same officer that she was pregnant from, one of the twins, the Farwell brothers, Matt Farwell. Matt Farwell's wife was in the hospital giving birth the next day. This is who these people are. His brother William was known to pass her. I mean, this was in the investigation. Pass her around to his friends, have her sleep with other men. You know what he's doing now? Guess what he's doing?
He went to another department.
Worse.
Oh, great.
He's a TSA agent in the District of Columbia in DC.
To violate people's privacy. Cool.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And not only that, TSA was, from what the district attorney investigators told me, I asked them about that, and they said, well, they were made aware. So they knew, and they hired this Farwell anyway.
Which is why we always say ACAB includes the DOJ and the ICE and all of them, because they
all
just
of them
don't fucking care, man. They need a certain type of person to do those jobs, and they need people with no scruples to do those jobs. That's just my
opinion. Absolutely. When you see these pictures of Sandra with these police, it's really heartbreaking, because even when she's older, she looks like a little girl.
I wondered, because I haven't seen much, for me, because I've known about this case, but I haven't looked at the details, because it's such a difficult, once I know it's what it's mostly entails, it's hard to know the details of. Of course, I want to talk about that with you tonight, but I haven't looked at many pictures of her or learned many details other than what I like, the inappropriate behavior, inappropriate communications type thing, which could mean, a lot of different things, but it sounds almost like she was being trafficked in a way by them.
That's exactly. And I mean, that's basically admitted to in the investigation. When you read it, They said that the Farwell was passing her around and telling her to sleep with other men. Joshua Heel was the animal control officer in Stoughton when this was happening. He was friends with the Farwells and with Divine.
That's why we say all cops are bastards, all the way from the attorney general all the way down to dog catcher, man. You give
Absolutely,
these types of people that are cool at caging things. That's the only tool the police have. If you're able to wrap your head around caging living beings and your dominance, you're probably going to be a borderline fucking sociopath.
Well, they're worse than that, though. It's like, so Heel isn't a young man. I think he's in his late 40s, something like that. When I went to talk to the district attorney's office, I went to talk to the district attorney, I want to say back in October. I had a meeting with them in Canton. And I went and I sat down with 2 of the detectives who were investigating her case. And they had said, don't worry, we really want to solve this. You know, this disturbs us just as bad. And they were overly gracious to me and like a little too eager to appear as though they really gave a shit. They even said to me at one point, you know, I hope you realize that we really do want to solve this and get some justice for Sandra. But we are hitting roadblocks. Yeah, all right, sure.
I also want to just thank Joanna for being so honest and saying like, I don't know all the details, because when you're in the work like Joanna and I are, we see these details every fucking day. And I also don't need to necessarily know. It's weird. And this is what white people do. They turn it into a sport, knowing every fucking detail, gory detail. So I want to, like, the people at home, it's a good time to remind you, it's a-okay if you don't, like when the Tyree Nichols video came out, if you were like feeling weird about watching it because it was being hyped up, if you're feeling weird, that's a good instinct and you should be proud of yourself. It doesn't mean you look away about police and justice. It just means you don't have to turn this into like a sports guy remembering every stat. You know, you don't have to argue with everybody about every case, because at the end of the day, this is violence being perpetrated by the state. We need to reframe it that way. And I just want to, like, you know, Joanna, like I like to be, I think I'm a little more detail oriented when it comes to the trauma, but like I also sometimes look away about details because it's just like I see so much of it. I don't
With Sandra's case,
Well, it's just so horrifying. Hers is just so with children involved. It's really hard for me. And she was a child for so much of this. So once I hear the like overarching stuff, like, you know, 13, 15, that's young, like to know too much more is just so heartbreaking. And I'm not saying that, Laura, I'm so thankful that you do know more. It's just kind of what Spencer said, to protect myself sometimes. Like, no, I did not watch the Tyrese Nichols video. And I sometimes have to be careful about certain information because it's so constant and it's always the police harming us. And it's oftentimes women and children or people of color. The people who need the most protection are the most marginalized people in society, basically.
And it doesn't matter how old the person is. These police are abusing their position of authority. So let's say Sandra was a 21-year-old looking to potentially get into the career and go into some sort of internship.
I would still be sad.
That would still be inappropriate. It would, like, there's no drawing lines. Well, it's only inappropriate because she was a young one. No, you're in a position of authority. This is why what Bill Clinton did in the 90s was a problem. It wasn't him having sex. It was the fact that he was dealing with a fucking employee. It's not okay.
It was the power dynamic.
And then then you start adding the aggravating factors like age discrepancy. Were they a minor? Yeah, not good. All this is bad. It was bad just from even having a relationship with somebody that you're mentoring, regardless of age.
Absolutely.
That's the thing. I think men like to split hairs on that shit. And I work in a male dominated place and people always, well, you know, she's old enough. You can like look. And it's like the fact that you have to like put that preposition there
I know that makes it a problem.
I feel
It
like,
makes
don't
it
you
a
see the problem here? And I kind of get sticky with people in male circles at work and stuff like this, because it's not cool to call it out, but like you got to call it out because this is the trickle down effect. Sorry.
It is. Well, the point that I was trying to make when I was in their office talking about, the investigation and that, it's hard for me because I have PTSD. I'm a military veteran and I don't have PTSD from war. I have PTSD from this sort of stuff. That's a very real problem. Right.
Right. And it's hard, like, exactly. And like you become like, I think you must feel the same way. Sometimes these stories are just so heart-wrenching that it's
Well, I have to back away from it. If I spend like several hours on Sandra, I have to back away for another day and come back.
that makes
But I'm
sense.
coming back. I'm coming back to it every day because I am so fucking. I'm
Oh,
so
you're
sick
good. You're
of
good.
this
Yeah.
shit.
We're also
I am
fucking sick of it,
so
Laura.
tired. I am done. I said to Brandon today, I said, Brandon, I said, I think unfortunately that Minahane's right, that they are trying to let time kind of heal the wounds and let these guys get on with their lives. She didn't matter to enough people, and I think that's how they feel.
So
And I
they
think
were,
that's
they were all three were fired and it was 3 officers, right?
Yep.
But they still were able to get but they were able to get jobs elsewhere. Basically.
One got a job very quickly with the
TSA,
TSA.
and so the other 2, did they work nearby or did
Well, let me
they?
tell you about Joshua
Oh,
Hill, boy. All right.
Well,
okay.
before you
We
dive into
had,
that, I want to give the audience some context about, you mentioned Kirk Minahan. He has a podcast that I want to be able to link people to that source.
it's called The Case.
Yeah,
Season
yeah.
2.
There's a
Okay.
podcast called The Case Season 2. Kirk Minahan, I could do a whole episode on Kirk Minahan because I grew up on Sports Talk Radio, but that's not for here or there. He did do an investigative podcast going deep into details about Sandra Birchmore, so you can hear another perspective there. We'll link it in our notes. So you mentioned Kirk Minahan called out the game that they're just trying to run out the clock, and this is where
right.
PAs and unions and the politicians all just wait. We got a means test, all the same shit we hear all the time. Means testing has nothing to do with this, but it's just they love kick the can, right? Isn't that the old political saying? Kick the can.
You wouldn't believe the stuff that I heard when I went to see them about the reasons why none of these men have been charged with a crime or put on a list. Of course, when I went and saw them, the Canton DA, I met with Detective Fanning of the state police, and I don't even remember what the other detective's name was, but they were very solicitous of me and very, but one thing that really stuck with me is that they could not help themselves. They would talk about, the rank of misogyny in the Stoughton Police Department. They were right. But, they always had to qualify something with, well, Sandra was an attention seeker. And, she did sleep with a lot of people. And, she did like really text the guys a lot. I mean, there was always, she was like that. So what? They made her that way. That was my response to them. They made her that way. Well, yeah, but she was, always texting them and always, thinking about them. And I'm like, well,
but when you're 27 and a 15-year-old texts you and you're a cop, you'd shut that down.
You do, yeah. Yeah. But I mean that it was almost like victim. It was low-key victim blaming.
Oh, I bet. Oh, I'm sure.
And I don't think that they even like thought they were victim blaming. I thought that they probably think that they were, they really want to do good, but they were definitely like kind of slut shaming, victiming Sandra.
Well, even the chief of police, there's like a quote from the chief that says, Miss Birchmore was a vulnerable person who had one constant in her life since childhood, her unwavering admiration of police officers, of those serving in the military, people in uniform, people with oaths and duties to protect and serve. This admiration led her to form relationships with men who are willing to take advantage of her. And that's a terrifying statement to me, just like the whole thing based
that
on.
put the onus on Sandra. Right.
Hey,
Yeah.
Put the onus on someone.
you know how
Yeah.
that's for me? That sounds like, I don't know, September 2001, the church scandal that broke out at my high school, Boston College High School. All right. So, like, that's exactly what they said, like, about the young men being groomed by the priests. It's the same fucking argue. It's the same thing. It's literally the same, like the same language they're using to justify, to limit their liability, all of it.
The
Think
military has an infamous sexual assault problem that
Oh,
they don't deal with, and they are famous for letting sexual abusers just sexually abuse, whether it's overseas or whether it's with their colleagues.
Mhm.
That is very well known, and this is the same kind of shit is what they're doing, and it enrages me because she, she really was very vulnerable.
Well,
Didn't
yes, absolutely.
didn't the chief in your town, I believe this is on topic but off topic, didn't you mention one of the chiefs around you referred to his force as a paramilitary?
That was Chief Sellen. That's on television, even in his interview.
So they even
And
think
that
they're military.
he came out and said it when they. I will say the exception to reactionary Clear Channel News would be Ryan Kath and Shara Stoll over at Channel 10. They love exposing the cops. They do. Yeah, they interviewed him after it came out, and they asked him on Channel 10, and you can still find it.
Okay.
They said, well, do you think you have an anger management? No, not me. Not me. And it was like, you don't have an. Why do you think everybody's so upset? Well, we are a paramilitary organization. And my neighbors in my building the next day were like, what the fuck he said, because we know they are a paramilitary organization. They know it. But a lot of the regular normie public doesn't get that. So when you say that on Channel 10, they're like, fuck him. Rightfully so.
That reminds me of when Trump at the George Floyd protests in May 2020, when he basically threatened every citizen with occupying us with the National Guard on national TV in a speech. And my Trump loving dad was there in my house. It's important to point that out. Like, in my
Yeah.
saying, "Oh, that's not a threat." I was like, that motherfucker literally just said, "I don't care who you are. If you get in our way, we'll put you down like dogs in the street." That's literally what he fucking said. And I was incensed. And then ever since then, I've kind of been, I'm not like pulling punches. These people, all the way from the president, all the way down to the chief of police, they know they can do it because we've given them.
I said to Brandon, when we were talking about this issue with Sandra, Brandon Griffith, yes, Brandon, I am a co-founder of the Workers' Party of Massachusetts. And we ran 3 candidates for office this year. Myself, Nick Giannone, and Brandon Griffith. Brandon Griffith ran for office in Whitman, which is actually one of the most reactionary areas in Massachusetts. Brandon took in over 20% of the vote. Brandon's a pretty good guy, but Brandon finally watched the last episode of Kirk Minahane's podcast, and we had talked about it the other night. And he said, he's like, this is just unbelievable. I said, well, yeah. I said, it sucks, but he's right. I said, but you know what? I am not in the mood to let it just die out and go away. I am so done. I am not in the mood for this.
And what can we do, Laura? Because I see, did it happen? So just to ask questions, like the Chief McNamara has said that they were going to notify the Post Commission, which I know doesn't always mean anything. And then so that and hope that these people never serve in law. Like that chief said, like, this stuff is so bad that I don't even want them to serve in law again. And
I think she's full of shit. And I'm going to tell you why I think she was full of shit.
I know, and I'm not saying these are just quotes I'm seeing, but so if they were fired, like, is there anything that, like, what can we, I guess the collective we do to put more pressure on this community, or do anything to these people involved in this?
I think we have to continually keep massive pressure on the public and make them aware, because one of these cops, Joshua Heel was the animal control officer. I'm not going to go into how he was involved, but it was not very good. It was really gross. There was evidence about Joshua Heel. And what you brought up there, Spencer, about what they were able to prove with her and Joshua Heel, she was not a child when that occurred, but there's still a huge power dynamic. And, you know, he offered her a kitten. She wanted a cat. And he gave her a cat without, you know, going through the proper procedure. But he was involved in this. And I'm not going to go into how. People can look that up for the same reasons we talked about the Tyree video and all of that. He went from Stoughton to Abington and was working for a brief time as a patrol cop. Thought, okay, I'm getting bumped up from animal control to patrol cop. And Jeff Heel didn't even like animals. He was the animal control officer. He famously does not like dogs or cats.
A cab includes dog catcher. I'm going to say this, maybe if I ever run for office, I'm going to say I'm getting rid of the dog prison complex. I swear to God, and I think we could win over neoliberals.
I think you're right. They care more about dogs than they do people like
they
Sandra
do.
Birchmore.
They do, though.
That's
they
what
do.
makes me so angry, and really, it really struck a chord with me, her case. He went on to Abington, and he's a patrol officer for a little while, and he puts in for a promotion to school resource officer. And
Oh, God.
he was a school resource officer in Abington when the investigation broke.
Narrated.
He also did something even creepier. And he had gotten permission and funding from the town to get a golden retriever puppy or a lab puppy, something like that, to use as like a comfort dog in the school. He did a whole Instagram account with it. It made it look official, although the account wasn't official. It was his own account, but he made it look like Town Abington, the dog.
You're literally describing my nightmare. Like
creeping on girls, use it to kind of flirt with young girls with.
You're literally like, you're giving me it's triggering me so bad, because on my TikTok algorithm, the live, the only thing that's propaganda is the algorithm always pulls up cops live on TikTok. And not only are they doing what you're insinuating, right? I think they're doing the same thing. They also, on TikTok, you can monetize your lives. So they're double dipping on the job with our image, with our shit. Like, it's like, that's.
It gets worse, though. It gets worse than even
if I was making money off my day job and not cutting the boss in, like on an Instagram account, and I'm just out here, like, you know, for the XYZ meat company I work for, and I'm on Instagram or whatever, or like TikTok live, and like monetizing and don't notify them, like, that's a big fucking no.
I know it.
Putting their
the stuff these guys pull and that they get away with at my job, either one of my jobs, in the summer I work as a lifeguard at my building, and during the winter, if I work, I do cut fruit platters, whether it's at grocery stores. Right now I do it for Shaw's. If I pulled any of this shit, or even like made motions to do any of this crap, not only would I be immediately fired, they'd have me escorted out of the building and told never to return. There wouldn't be a million, we're going to pay you for like a year and a half. We're going to see if maybe we'll take your certification from ever do this again. Joshua Heel was recently recertified by Post.
Oh, God. So this is the thing that I want the audience to understand.
It gets worse. It's the corruption, right? And I can talk about the corruption of this whole thing and have it be dark and enraging enough without having to go into what they did to her.
Exactly.
People can, what they did to her is just like, it's heart-wrenching, and I can't. So we'll talk about this.
So other than the
He-
podcast, do you have a definitive, like a good place that we could send listeners to get a more deep dive? Do you have anything like any journalists you recommend or publications that have had done decent reporting?
On her case, only the podcast. So this is why I really want to jump on it and keep it in the public eye. I don't want to let this rest. If it takes me organizing the Workers' Party to stand outside of the Stoughton PD, if it takes me doing that to stand outside, have people stand out there and humiliate them, I'll do it, because I'm really sick and tired of this shit. What happened with Joshua Heel is, like I said, he's quite a bit older. He's in his late 40s, I believe. The town, when they put him on suspension, now the town had asked when he applied to be a patrol officer. I guess they were aware that he was mentioned in the investigation, and they hadn't come out with the results of the investigation yet. Stoughton told them, and the DA's office, well, he's just a witness. So far, we don't have anything on him. He should be fine to hire. Joshua Heel
for
left
the
his
school
wife,
resource thing. This is for the school resource.
over in Abington.
Oh my
Abington,
god.
yep. So he left his family for a woman that he went on a domestic violence call to her house. That's who Joshua Heel is. Well, Joshua Heel takes this Instagram account, and the town of Abington was getting a little antsy about it because it did look official. The dog, when they suspended him, they had to give the dog to the woman cop who took his place as school resource officer. Come to find out, Heel hadn't trained that dog, hadn't housebroken it, fed it, and probably took it, but never really, he basically neglected the thing. He didn't even want it. They asked him to remove if they could have control of the Instagram page, because they found out about it. Can we have it? And he wouldn't give it up.
Ooh.
He stubbornly kept it for a while. It's mine. He eventually deleted the whole page. But the town tried to get him, and now he's been found to be okay to certify by post. The other ones, the Divine and the Farwells, Divine has already been in trouble for this with an after-school program.
I saw that, like in the past, he's had issues before, and so that's why with the chief of police, even, it's like, why are you hiring him in the first place? Like, it just doesn't
it was her who told Abington, oh well, he's just mentioned in it. I don't buy what she says for a minute. So
this all sounds like money laundering to me. Like I
know it's awful. It's like so crazy.
Like, oh, we need to get this dog program. And it's like, and then you're gonna abuse the dog on top of it and just use it as a fucking prop. And it could possibly get somebody hurt, and who's gonna pay the bill for that? Like the taxpayer.
Well, I guess it's a very sweet little dog, but it's, it wasn't housebroken. It didn't know how to behave,
Right.
Yeah, but a dog,
you're gonna have
dog and an unhealthy dog is a dangerous dog.
Yes, you're 100% right. And this is supposed to be a dog that, you're
like a comfort dog. Yeah.
It's
I wonder if there's receipts on him getting it trained, and then he just pocketed it and made up the receipts.
it wouldn't shock me in the least.
Comfort dog would need professional training. Something that's not just some random guy.
No, he basically used the dog as a prop.
That's so inhumane.
I guess talking, what I understand, he was sweet talking and kind of flirting with young girls. Using the dog as a prop online. So
go look at it anytime the weedout, or when I had personal accounts on the internet. If I called out propaganda on an Instagram post of like the Northampton PD, like it happened yesterday, I just was like, this is indoctrination. Have a good day. And somebody responded like, the real indoctrination is Northampton Public Schools. Back the blue.
Oh, they hate the schools.
Ignore the
schools.
Ignore the haters.
Well, I'll tell you what else.
So yeah,
I remember one of our Workers' Party comrades, Jill Sheridan. She's a teacher at Mansfield Public Schools. She's a middle school teacher.
Okay.
And her classroom has been having a leak for like 3 or 4 years. But the town of Mansfield, a wealthy suburb with a huge tax base, now we can't afford to get that fixed. Was it a week or two ago, we had such torrential rain, it was raining in her classroom.
Oh my God.
Meanwhile, the school resource officer is sitting in his room on his phone like he does all day long. I think at the very best that school resource officers do in schools is when they do nothing at all.
Yeah, I agree
And I
there.
guess
I
that's
do agree with you there, but they are still then, just so the audience knows, even they're getting paid usually pretty well. And
better than the teacher.
Fun
And
stat. In the history since Columbine, I think when they started keep tracking this, not one school shooting has been prevented by an SRO. Not one. Not one. They have zero. There's zero for how many?
Not only have they not stopped it, they majority of the time they make it much more tragic
well,
than
and then
it ever had to be.
exactly. And in this case with Sandra Birchmore, they basically targeted and then molested, raped, and trafficked a young girl.
Yeah.
Like in a nutshell, it's like horrifying that like these people that you're putting in there trying to build your kids up and make them feel quote unquote better and get used to. So that's the other part of that quote that I read that like I just feel like I hope people think about this too. Like the chief is basically saying like these people took an oath to preserve and protect and but did horrible things and should no longer ever be officers. But it's like, but they did do horrible things and that happened. And if 3 officers in one place, and it says 4 may have been involved, sounds like way more people were involved.
Wound up being 4, yeah. There were more than that because there was the military recruiter.
I saw that.
And you know what? I know the area. And, let's be real here. Regional cops hang out with regional cops. They socialize. I don't think a lot of people get this either. Police socialize like a cult.
Totally.
Their wives hang out with mostly only cop wives.
Mm-hmm.
They vacation, they do it together. They hang out at the same bars. They go to the same restaurants. And, they isolate themselves from the public in that sense. I guess Sandra at one point had seen Matt Farwell. I think it was Matt or William, one of the twins, at a town event or even a cop event with his family and his wife, and approached him. What do you think the cop wife did? Who do you think the cop wife was mad at?
Her.
She wasn't upset with her husband.
No, I picture her being mad at a young, I picture, that makes sense.
Yeah. And they all, and it's not just Stoughton, like I was saying earlier about the propaganda that came out of Coventry, Rhode Island. I believe it was Coventry or Cumberland. It was on the Providence Channel, but it was one of those towns. It's all the same region, and all those cops hang out with each other. And when I was sitting in the office, in the DA's office, I said to Fanning, I said, what about all these cops that knew?
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like there had to be more.
I said, aren't they mandated reporters? Like as police, aren't they supposed to report that? Well. And I never, I never got an answer.
I think they would. I think they are, but I don't know for sure. I know teachers.
I know what mandated reporters have to do.
Right.
They would have to report that they were trafficking and abusing a girl, and then later on as a woman, using power to do it. She didn't have anybody.
Right.
That's all she had in her life. And they took full advantage of it. Divine even admitted that. Yeah, I knew she was a trouble girl. But he thinks, of course, he's the victim. And I don't know if people really get how pervasive this is. And it's, the police are the oppressors. And they're where you can't even, there are no good cops, not a single one. They are enabled and encouraged along by municipal officials, DAs, attorney generals, state's attorneys, and and cop unions.
I mean, think about Maura Healey right now. She's talking
Oh
about
man, don't even get me started on her.
she's a former attorney general, so she's the top cop. She decides like what we focus on for crime from street level all the way up to white collar. And you know, she runs as a progressive person, identity politics, all the stuff, but at the end of the day, she's a jailer, and that's all she knows how to do. And when asked about
Yeah, good.
teachers in Woburn potentially striking, she doesn't approve of it and doesn't think the teachers should be allowed to strike because somebody think of the children. It's like, well,
Yeah,
pay the teachers what they
them.
need. You're doing good by the children. Like, you know, this is money talks and bullshit walks. So like, pay them. It stops
I have no trust for any of these people. It's like
paying out
it's
for
like Wu
stop.
in Boston is another bootlicker. I mean, she was quite obvious, like right after she got elected. Huh?
I think they get leaned on. I think they get threatened.
Probably. But then don't do it, right? Don't run. She immediately, like right after she got elected, had a sweep of mass and gas with cops.
That was horrible.
You know, she was walking down the street with the local, you know, mini chamber kind of douchebag. And I mean, how do you expect people to go, oh, yeah, we'll vote blue, this will fix us? They won't. But we've got to, because these practices are putting everybody's kids at risk. They're putting everybody at risk. I don't care if it's Tyree Nichols in Memphis or George Floyd in Minneapolis or Sandra Birchmore in Stoughton or Marianne Griffiths in Easton. That this isn't a problem for somewhere else. This is a problem that's permeating our own communities. I don't care where you live.
And the delusion of people who only get news from certain sources, whatever, we could discuss that that could be a whole book. That could be many books of the illiteracy. But the average person, they see, okay, so Mass Live, let's just pretend they're also one of the tiny TV program local shows because it's all the same shit. They'll have 3 propaganda things with like a cop car in the thumbnail, or like baby duck saved, or you know,
solve the case about
a bullet jumped out of a cop's gun and somebody's dead now, type of headlines. And then you also have like, hey, Wendy's has a new special this week, or hot tables coming to Chicopee, and you're like, what? Like, how is this news? And it's like, well, there's not a dearth of news. Like, you know, life is pretty boring. It's like every department of every government, for example, is doing fucked up shit that needs to be held accountable, and it's actually really valuable for us to invest in journalism and
like real journalism, like what you guys are doing. My friend Mike Crawford is doing it on the Young Jerks, Andrew Comer. But like, you're right. I think Ryan, Kath, and Shara are pretty good, but for the most part, you know, local news, certainly, you know, the cable news is hideous. But yeah, Donna McNamara really pisses me off because
who's Donna McNamara?
Yeah, she's the chief at Stoughton. She's a woman chief. She's been the chief of Stoughton not very long. I don't think she was in maybe a month or two when the investigation went public about Sandra.
Yeah, because could they press charges against these men even though like she's passed?
Well, that's what I had that discussion. That's the excuse that Fanning and the investigators are saying. We don't have Sandra to ask to confirm any of this stuff.
I know, but come on, you have like the actual records from her phone and
They
emails.
insisted to me that they thought she killed herself. I don't think she killed herself.
I've seen that report in a bunch of
I don't think she killed herself. There was a necklace apparently torn off of her neck.
Oh God.
There was evidence that there was activity that night. There was and he wasn't there for long. He wasn't in her apartment for very long at all. And they said she hung herself on a bureau or a closet door. I don't see that happening in an apartment, but
sounds like Epstein.
Yeah, he said to me, Fanning said to me, well, you know, he said, you know what I do think, and I think he was trying to be solicitous and try to, the good cop routine, said to me, well, I do think that like in the case that happened in Plainville with that girl, that he convinced her to kill herself. And I was like, no, because she had just spent a whole day like showing her friends ultrasound pictures. She was
How is that
excited
better?
about the baby. She was, you know,
How is that better? Convincing somebody to kill himself. That's actually
it's
work.
not, it's not, yeah.
It's
But they
psychological.
can't prove it.
That's like
I
fuck.
think they know. I think that he killed her. Whether we will know it or not, but I think we need to make their lives living hell until we do know what happened here and what the public has to know what happened here, because every woman that drives around this area that could be pulled over, who knows how many of these cops were involved in this?
Exactly. And and if nothing else, they're compliant. So they wouldn't even help you if something was happening potentially. And if you're
No,
and if you're a parent, this for me is as alarming. I am an aunt and I just love children in general, and that in respect to them being beautiful, innocent people still. And I am appalled that schools allow officers to be alone with children like this. And I think any parent should be as well. Normalizing your kids to be okay with authoritarian figures. And then this is what ends up happening because, I mean, look at the clergy, look at anything where there's a power dynamic like we've just talked about. I think, and like you've said, Laura, like as an adult woman, I'm still terrified of the police too, because they could pull us over. And I believe Massachusetts, it's still it's illegal for them to, like, once we're under arrest and in their cop car, like rape us, and it's not called rape and they don't get in trouble. And it's
in
36
plain
states.
consent.
Yeah,
And
it's like
I guarantee you, no municipality is going to take your side in that either.
no, they did.
None.
It's
Yeah.
I'm with you. Like I'm very afraid to be alone with any officers.
I want to point
And
out I'm not a woman. I am very much a white normative man. But the thing that's really like shook me the most, one of the things that kind of made me an abolitionist, like full throttle, was learning about the rate of Black and Indigenous women in America going missing and us never hearing about it.
yep, disappear them. They disappear right off of the face of the earth.
If you sprinkle in a few dynamics that are missing from Sandra Birchmore's case, she's a white woman, but she has no strong family unit or money of any kind, or even existing. Like the people that birthed her don't exist anymore, and that's rare for somebody that's 23 years old. Like most people do have somebody still around that could make some noise, an aunt, an uncle, a couple aunts and uncles, and that ingredient's missing. So she's marginalized, but most of the time with white women, like that woman in Cohasset, that like everybody was like true crime propagandaing on it, and it was like driving me crazy. It's like, what are we doing here? Do we care about this person that was murdered, or is this like porn?
It's the same thing. Another thing they used a lot of propaganda on. I don't know if you heard about the woman in Dartmouth. I think it was last week.
Is this the woman that was in postpartum?
Yeah, in postpartum and murder of kids, I guess.
And if we had proper health care and her husband didn't have to be out of the house to go to the grocery store or do what they need to do to survive, she shouldn't have been in a position to be responsible 1000% for those children when you're postpartum. It's like a total disregard for.
She worked at Mass General as a nurse in the NICU.
It's so
And
unfortunate.
I remember just last week, myself and my female coworker, my woman coworker, who's my age. The first thing we were talking about was when, she comes out of that coma, she's going to be devastated. I really feel bad for her. And the guys were like, oh, I hope they nail her, And it's like, do you understand what postpartum depression is?
They don't.
And they would say, yeah. But then you'd explain to them, we were explaining to them, you go into psychosis, you have hallucinations, you break with reality.
Absolutely.
And then they would like, oh yeah, really? And they believe you for like an hour. But then they'd be like, oh, I heard that the one kid was found like this. And it completely goes in one ear and out the other. With Sandra, this is really sad. One of the guys involved in this was a military recruiter.
We know his name.
No, you know how they handled the military recruiter? Just how I knew they were going to handle him.
Ship him out of town.
They reported it to his base and then shut the hell up. And they're not giving out any names. It's in the jurisdiction of the military. And you know what the military is going to do about this? Nothing.
They're just gonna ship him out of town.
I
Send
figured
him
I figured that's why I couldn't find the name.
shittier assignment. That's about it. That's their punishment.
But they have no, I don't think they have any intention on ever holding any of them accountable. And what's scary about it is, all right, you're not holding them accountable. We haven't heard from Post about the Farwells. We haven't heard from Post about Divine. Why not? Should be kind of cut and dry. Unfortunately, we heard about Josh Heel, who's certified to work as a cop. One of the Farwells is at the TSA. Giving cops passes all this time. It's like, this is what it's brought us. Where your own governments prioritize the feelings and the careers and the family lives and the futures of really predatory, nasty people, like the worst that humanity has to offer. I'm sorry, that's what these guys are.
No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And we're giving them great
Civil War-
benefits, pensions, everything.
Yeah, and then they prioritize that over the literal like well-being and general basic safety of the general public.
Absolutely.
Like far above that. I mean, if a civilian did any of these things, it wouldn't even be a question.
You might get executed on the street.
Yeah. I mean, it's
You get executed for 20, a supposed counter for 20. So,
and another thing is like with trauma and stuff, poor Sandra, I mean, that shit goes downhill. How many other Sandras are there? You can't tell me Sandra was the only one.
Exactly. That's the scariest
The whole
part. And
group
that
of cops.
and it's likely not just heteronormative men either. It's likely,
I know for a fact it's not that.
no.
there's likely other abuses happening in the non-obvious ways, because people think this is a really misogynistic, patriarchal community. But when there's homophobia, that means there's closeted homosexuality. I'm telling you, I went to an all-boys school. I can fucking sniff out closeted aggressive
Predators.
fucked up behaviors from a mile away. And cop culture, I shouldn't say, I obviously only know anecdotes, but like cop culture reeks of all the things my mother tried to beat into me as best she could, knowing she was going to be putting me in a scenario being like swimming with all these dudes, right? So to speak. And so like when you say something like postpartum depression, like luckily I'm fortunate, like in a way my mom militantly beat that into me, right? But yeah, I can attest, like my fellow bros, they're not all right, like to like use a parlance of our times, like heterosexual men, especially men that gravitate towards throwing human beings in cages or dogs in cages, they're not all right. And it's crazy that we give them the power we give them. And I know we shouldn't quote unquote paint with a broad brush, but it's like, no, we can also look at this from like a capitalistic managerial point of view. It's like they clearly have a type.
No, it's whoever they can, who, a lot of them.
There's a
Um,
pattern of practice to how they hire.
yes, yes. And if you do any, you, all you have to do is a little bit of cursory research into these mentoring programs and to school resource officers, because this isn't just a well-documented problem with mentoring programs like the Explorers or Athletic Leads. A lot of SROs have been found to have committed these sort of acts too with kids. A lot of them. It's just not worth having them in there. But yeah, I mean, see, that's the thing. People need to understand that this is happening. This is happening in your wealthier suburb. You're not immune. The cops don't care about you either.
And you've given them
because
tank.
they don't. The
So-
women, I went out shortly after this broke, the story broke about Sandra, her investigation. She had a group of friends from Stoughton and Canton that she'd gone to school with or whatever over the years. That when they heard about it, they were horrified women who held a vigil and a rally out there, you know, justice for Sandra Birchmore. And I went and I met with them. And I mean, Jesus, you know, they knew about Divine, they knew about all this stuff. You know, other girls had problems with these guys. You cannot tell me Sandra was the only one. You cannot tell me these were the only cops involved. You cannot tell me that nobody knew a thing. Another thing is Fanning in the Canton DA. I said, what about, and I don't recall the chief's name at the time. It was not McNamara, it was the man before. But he was the chief that had decided to give Divine another pass. A lot of people think that Divine was probably the ringleader in all of this, and it seems to be the case. He was older. He got the Farwells into the department, into the Explorers. He chose to run it like a paramilitary, the Explorers program, and have kids going on ride-alongs alone with police. And that chief that made that decision is now a chief down on the Cape. So I said to Fanning and the other cop that was sitting there, I don't even remember his name. I said, what about this guy? I mean, how is he still a chief after this happened? Oh, well, he said he was just appalled and that they'd had a falling out and like didn't talk anymore. I'm sorry. Best case scenario, chief had no idea. But I mean, I don't believe that to be true. But you know, even if he says that, who wants the judgment of someone like that running a police department? Chief is somewhere else.
Exactly.
That you
Yeah, I
don't
agree.
know people that well, that you make that bad of a decision. Like that's the best case scenario. And I don't believe the best case scenario. But you know, this is and then you've got the DA's office just lapping that up, like, well, you know, and we can't verify this with Sandra that this happened. They've got text messages going back. That's not enough though, because you know, he said that's not true, but we can't verify with because she's dead.
Yeah.
Trust us, we're trying to do the right thing. I don't think they are. I think they're letting it. And I'm really angry. But I think that we need to keep this as public as we can, keep reminding the public, especially people who live in like suburbs and think that they're immune to this. No, you're not.
Absolutely. And it's not okay for you to let the police near your children. I mean,
No, it's not. It's not okay to call for more school resource officers when the evidence that we have very clearly shows that it's more of a detriment than a help.
And I was raised a goddamn proud American. All right. I'm just gonna say this for everybody in the back. I thought we grew up with like, you know, you try to limit your interaction with the government. I feel like that was verbatim told to me by my dad. Like, yeah, I mean, in general, we're small government people, son. we don't fuck with the government. So like try to keep your nose clean, mind your own fucking, all the cliches, but like don't fuck with the police, basically. If you can avoid it. Like don't willingly go deal with the people that could throw you in a cage. Like it was very, so I don't understand why people boot. I do know why. It's cultural brainwashing and cultural indoctrination that we're all, we're not special for having kind of unlearned it or seen it and like being able to take a few steps back and notice it. It is what it is. Like it's okay, and I think we got to like forgive ourselves for that as the culture, but like we also got to like stop falling for it. And
Well, because I think we've reached a critical mass, because I think
Yeah.
that what people of color and people in very marginalized communities have been experiencing forever, that's spread out now. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's always spread out, but it's spread out to the point where they're on it. They're not even trying to pretend anymore.
Exactly. It's just blatant disregard for like it's not even like they're saying it out loud constantly.
and we've
Yeah,
spent
and like,
sorry, no, please.
no, go ahead.
I was
Go
gonna
ahead,
say
Spencer.
spent a lot of time talking about other people. I wanted to just ask you this question for myself, but the audience too. Like, how do you personally, Laura, the community member, the family member, the regular person, how do you deal with the criticism and the pushback of, hey, I agree with you, like in principle and all that stuff, but like you should be afraid of these people you're criticizing? How do you communicate to your loved ones that like how it like because there is a truth to that, but also like
I had my car keyed over during the election. I know that.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't have any like violence or threats, but I mean, my car did get keyed during the selling
no, I'm more
stuff.
talking about like your loved ones being like, I'm sure you have somebody in your life that you care about that actually is kind of like pushing you to be quieter. You know what I mean? How do you deal with
Yeah,
because there is a
no,
lot of self-censoring and
I
people
can't.
have overcome it, but like what's your message to them?
I'm going to tell you why. All right. And I mean, this especially applies to Sandra because I see, a lot of the stuff that she experienced, I experienced myself, but like in a little bit of a different way. Of course it wasn't exact, but I mean, a lot of that stuff. And I saw how they just treated her. I mean, in the municipality, all of it, they're like, oh, yeah, that's bad. Okay, let's move on. Like like they don't like even think of her as like having ever had potential of a life or like, you know, like ups, like, oh well. And I just can't, I don't care. I I'm not gonna go out of my way and do illegal stuff. I'm not a violent person. But I'm just done putting up with it. I'm done, you know, I'm done with people getting away with stuff like this. Because I guarantee you Sandra's not the only one. I don't plan on doing anything that would get me, in jail. But you know what though, if I had some consequences or like it got really fascist and they came to my door, that's what it is. I'm not going to tolerate this anymore. I'm not going to put up with it. I'm not going to put up with it in anybody's life. I'm sick of it, and
Here,
I'm
here.
done hearing it.
As you should be.
I
And
am.
like there's we got to be strategic in general. This is just maybe not to I think
You guys remember, right? I'm not. I try to do things like I try. I don't always succeed because we all make little mistakes.
of course.
I try to do things as by the book as I can. I do.
Of course.
I think that we do things above board. That says more about us than better of us than it does of them. At the same time, you also can't like just tolerate their shit anymore because it's gotten out of control. It really has.
I totally agree. And what I tell people, like the way to fight back, like in terms of non-violent ways, like you've talked about and you ran for office, is to try to go to your town meetings and get your counselors or your people. Like, I don't know if Stoughton's town council could do anything or the mayor there could do anything.
Well, see, here's the thing though, right? I think it does take the public making a spectacle and
Kind
showing up and
and
making
showing
them
up.
uncomfortable and calling them names and shaming them and like, however you can.
Yeah.
No, really.
I
Like so that it
hey,
brings
like
public attention. That's not violent. That's
No,
not
it's not.
violent.
It's
And I
not.
think I think it's absolutely necessary. I do.
hey,
It's
I've called out people at community meetings in multiple jurisdictions that I'm a part of, and I've had friends contact me afterwards and be like, you shouldn't have said that. I was like, well, all I did was literally describe their behavior and say their words back at them. Like I didn't invent anything. And it's just crazy just because you just said it pretty forcefully. It's like I'm just showing them the mirror, man. Like you gotta sometimes you match your energy and they get unraveled and it sucks. Like who wants to live in a world with discord? Like
I really wish I didn't have to be like that. I really
Me,
wish that like we had leadership in a government that gave a shit when like, a gang of cops abuse a young girl for
right.
years and she ends up dead, or they murder somebody, or whatever crap they get themselves up to. Um, but we don't have that. We need that.
Yeah.
And I'm just done. Like, do you guys remember Rory Woods, right? From back in the fall? The housing advocate, I guess. I guess she's a housing activist out your way. Went to an eviction with bees.
Oh, yes, I do
oh
remember
yeah.
that.
You know what I loved about her? Like, that's a goddess right there,
Yeah,
Rory
for
Woods.
real. For real.
I
Salem
mean, I
Witch
mean, I loved it.
Trial.
It was the cop was like, that deputy's allergic. You're allergic? Good. And like just the defiance in her mugshot, because I knew my friend said to me, oh, they're going to really crack down on her. I said, you know what? That's fine. I think Rory Woods knew that. And Rory Woods was like, consequences? Who cares? I've had it. I'm done with this shit.
Oh, that's some Salem witch trial shit. Like
That was beautiful. I mean, it was a
It
thing of, it
was.
was a work of art,
nature against the people that are trying to dominate nature.
and then, I'm reading the Gazette article from the action that you guys had down in Northampton.
Well, the Workers' Party, PSL, and
Yeah,
DSA hosted that. Just
yeah.
Northampton.
Ryan and them were there. And I was reading what the Northampton police chief was saying, and I mean, it's like, who fucking who?
I know they're
Really,
crybabies. They're such
like,
babies.
like, you're not the victim here, But that was her whole angle. Oh, poor suffering. We're not the bad cops. We actually did get defunded a little bit. Oh my God, the horror. And I mean that was her focus, and that's what you saw in Greenfield.
They're used to getting shit pulled out from under them. Work with less.
Well, yeah, I mean, no, but I think that
in every town gets asked to work with less.
I'm all for that stuff. I think it needs to happen because I think that's also how you build public support.
Yeah,
You
those
know,
are good. Those are good jobs. Actually doing something. Actually providing a service to the community as opposed to fining us to death. Because at best a cop just issues fines. At best, like that's them doing their nonviolent action is issuing a fine. So
well, I'm not into like I don't think it should all be performative, but I think people need to speak up and speak loudly. Like I'm all for standing in front of like the Easton police station with a bunch of signs going murderous pigs, all cops trash, cops are a cult,
quit.
cops traffic kids in our area. Because guess what? It's all true.
My favorite taunt is quit, period. That's what I like to say to them
Well,
because
it was funny the
when
day
because it always brings up engagement in a way where they think they can meet because it seems like kind of like not as aggressive, but it firm. And the best is because they're like, why? Why do you think I should quit? Because you're a class traitor, dude. So they walk right into that. So they're really listening to me. So I'm not just screaming words at them. I love doing it on the internet. And whenever I get an opportunity to have a conversation with people.
Well, Sandra's story really makes me really super enraged, because it also like shows like how atomized our whole society is, like how individualized you are and how alone, how people are without any kind of safety net in this world, because here she was basically alone in life. And, her government officials, adults that she had in her life that were certainly not, in her best interest, used that to just, be predators and do horrible things in like her short life. I mean, what a waste. What a total waste. And it's just then Josh Hill gets certified to be a cop in Mass. Well, then that tells me Post is bullshit too.
Exactly.
You know,
It's like you can't. I feel like this story is horrifying to me too, because you would hope that the people that are supposed to quote unquote serve and protect us, which I know they don't have to protect us, but wouldn't be like child sexual abusers too, on top of all the other, institutions where we find that happening. But it also shows you like how little, I guess, regard people have for victims of sexual assault and violence. Like I also want to keep this stories like Sandra Birchmore's story alive, because I feel like sexual abuse and trauma is so horrifying that, like you said, I don't necessarily believe she killed herself either, but honestly, it could drive someone to that point even still. Like it's just is such a it is such a horrifying experience. So, like in that respect, even if it did drive, like I feel like they killed her either way, because if she did kill herself, it's probably because of how horrible.
it absolutely was.
Yeah. Like it's
that
how
was
horrible it was.
Life from 13 years old was these
right.
cops.
And that's 10 years of just like straight up abuse constantly. And then the people you supposedly trust are actually harming you.
Yeah.
And I know we hear stories like this all the time, but it just kind of, I feel like there's and I'm a prison abolitionist, so I don't want any people to be like, caged necessarily, but the cops invented this institution of prison. And so in the cases of these individuals, I feel like, okay, let's use what we can against them, because it's I just, like you said, the Post has to be complete BS, because these people shouldn't even be working remotely near children, especially, but with other people at all.
Even all of the defenses they make for themselves, like, oh well, she was older when that happened with Heel.
Yeah, but gross. Like what?
It doesn't like even like in their best case scenarios, there's no way those any of those people should have any kind of position of authority ever
again.
Like I was saying about the chief, who was like, oh well, we had a falling out, and I'm sorry I gave him the Explorer program, but boy, did I make a mistake. Oh, he's such a victim, he feels so bad about it. Even if what he says was true, which I don't believe for a second, even if best case scenario, so what? You don't have the judgment to be running a fucking department then. You're not vetting people. You're not looking at the stuff that you're supposed to look at. I don't know, maybe mop up the floors or retire. But you don't need to be running a whole department and getting given that responsibility. I mean, Jesus Christ, come on.
Classic case of police telling on themselves. They do this all the time. Like in Northampton, the stat that always sticks out to me, they actually flexed in an official like interview with the local newspaper, trying to like prove that they're like, an equitable police force, because there was
misconduct. That was his whole jam, that was his whole marketing thing. And that's why like the whole DTC crowd loves him, because he pulled that whole like type of I'm a progressive police advocate. No, you're not.
And
then Yeah.
This is the stat they flexed. Like 66% of our pullovers are out of towners. And it's like, that means that you're targeting people you don't recognize just because you don't recognize them. Like, that doesn't sound very good to me. That sounds like a problem. Anyways, like, so their stats that you can spin it any way you want, so you got to be wary of all these propaganda posts. And I think this would be a nice like segue into our ghoulery and tomfoolery. We don't have a sound plug for that segment yet, but we're just gonna, ghoulery and tomfoolery, it's the weed out. And unfortunately, ghoulery and tomfoolery has to do with the Boston Globe and a case out of Easton of a cop murdering a person in crisis. And long story short, this is right down the street from Laura's.
Right down the street from me. Yeah. Yeah, right down the street from me in Easton, next town over.
Yeah, so Easton, Massachusetts, sleepy little suburb with a budget for police that probably have military weapons, because I don't understand why. If Easton, Massachusetts is very suburban, it's south of Boston, it's closer to like Rhode Island, right? Like
It's between Mansfield and Brockton.
Gotcha.
It's a very wealthy little suburb.
Exactly. And
people consider it to be safe and nice, yeah. It's, these are the type of people that I'm talking about. They don't think it can happen here, and it does.
so I'm going to read the headline. I'm going to this is such a disgusting example of burying the lead, propaganda, telltale sign for how bad the actual case is, because the further they obscure it, the more culpable they likely are, in my experience. So the Boston Globe reports on February 5th, or is updated on February 5th. So I don't know if that's the actual date it was released. But anyways, woman dead after Easton police officer fires at her following wellness check. Well, actually, that's a better headline. They changed the headline. Wow. Well, excuse me. Fuck me for not taking a screenshot. But the original headline was,
I saw the original headline.
Woman in crisis, officer doing wellness check, woman is dead, essentially was the lead. I'm butchering it. But Joanna, do you ever recall on that? Did we not should take a fucking screenshot?
I didn't. I don't remember.
The thing.
Well, people saw it. I saw it, and I was so angry. I mean, I couldn't even think. But yeah, I saw that, and I saw they changed it.
So basically, without knowing too many details, I don't want to speak out of school here, but basically, what we do know is a woman was having a mental health crisis. Cops were called on a wellness check. Likely, it was probably not received well that a man with a gun was at your door while you're having psychosis. I don't know if she was going through psychosis, but these are the situations where people end up dead, and officers are not trained to deal with people in psychosis, like they're or a mental health crisis. They're just not, and they're not the personality types that should be doing that. And they show up, and people are, whether you're sane or not, a man is at your house with a gun.
Yep. Well, I guess it was reported that someone who had called said she had taken an overdose of insulin to kill herself. Yeah. It wasn't, there was actually a group of cops there. And the weapon that she had was an air pump toy BB gun. It was a BB gun. And after the Easton cop shot at her, rather than seeing if she was all right, they sat out in their car and tried to call her. They didn't even want to go in. And then when they did go in, they found her dead. Yeah, I mean, they murdered someone on a wellness check. There's no way to make that any better. There's no way to make it all right or okay what they did. None. And this is another instance where even if you were to take every one of their excuses, best case scenario, it's still fucked up and shouldn't happen, and they need to be held accountable. And I'm sorry.
And you'll notice
And
that
that's just where I'm at. I mean, I think the case with Sandra really pushed me over the edge, but I mean, it's true. We just got to really speak it. We got to show up. We got to tell them. We got to keep pressure on them. We got to humiliate them in public if we have to. There's a guy on Twitter, Film the Police LA, is what his handle is. And that's what he does. He knows exactly what they're going to get suspended for a day for or something written up for. And it's usually not brutalizing people. It's usually stuff like, you know, uniform violations and, you know, crap like that. But he knows what they are.
right.
And
Well,
he follows them and he films them and he reports them and he knows what they're doing.
Google,
And
like, if anybody wants to find content like Film the Police, there's lots of people too all over the country. They're called First Amendment auditors, and or also hashtag Cop Watch. That's how you can find all that content.
But I mean, I think he really is making a difference in Hollywood because I mean, they've gotten the cops to go away a lot of times. And he said he has brought down the number of stops where people are really accosted or bothered. I think that's effective. I think ultimately we do have to defund and abolish these because this shit here, this is, and I guarantee you this is going to be another one where they try to keep it quiet because one of the DAs involved in Sandra's case is the DA here. This is the DA in Bristol, which I believe is Cruz. The DAs I spoke with were Norfolk up in Canton, but
And I want to point out how differently people get. So we as Americans, I'm going to bring it back to like, we're supposed to be Americans. One of our sacrosanct things is the right to privacy. And regularly police and court systems violate our privacy by putting our mugshots after we've been detained, after we've been arraigned, just trying to smear us, ruin us, for whether you did a crime or not, or you're just accused. It doesn't really matter. The government shouldn't do shit like that. It should be impartial as fuck. But meanwhile, it's impossible to keep your name out of the news if you're a brown person that did something, is accused of doing something violent, and your skin tone gets darkened, like all this shit that news and police releases do. Meanwhile, this cop, we don't know who he is. He's a public servant. He's out. This is actually where when you're administering your duties as a public servant, you kind of, while you're getting paid during those hours, you're not a private citizen. So
no.
you think it would be the other way around. If you're accused of a crime, it's, as we don't talk about it, you'll see it through court filings, and then after the fact, when the facts come out, then the press can go with it instead of ruining these people before they've had their day in court or any due process. And it's all to push people towards plea deals instead of going through the court process, yada yada yada. It's a whole different game. It's a whole different episode. But the fact that this cop, we don't know who he is. We don't, and what's ends up going to happen now, people are going to push for body cameras. So that's just more money that will go towards violating your privacy rights when you get pulled over by them and they do their tricky questions, or they say you're stop resisting while they have their hands on you. All the ways they use the body cams as a weapon. They don't know how to use anything not as a weapon. Body cameras have proven to be used as another weapon against you in the court of law. So body cams are actually not good for us as citizens overall, and it doesn't bring any accountability because they control the data. So what's going to come out of this Easton thing, the neoliberals will push for body cameras if they don't have them already.
Oh, they'll push to add to the police budget. They'll add to the police budget. I guarantee it. Guarantee it.
Training.
Well, and I think people's intentions are good. Like, I want the listeners who may think like, oh, but body cameras. Like 10 years ago, when I thought accountability of the police was a real thing that you could maybe have happen, I was like, oh, good, we're gonna have body cameras like in New York City. At the time, I was, excited that would happen there because then maybe it would come to smaller communities. But like Spencer said, like there's so much data from other places that it will just be used against you. I think people's intentions may be good, thinking like, oh, this accountability measure, but you've both talked about so many things, and I think we all know that like the cops create the narratives, they make the data, so like the accountability, and it's like the police policing the police.
And the
They
body
So
always investigate their own selves. Like there's
and
yeah,
the body camera won't prevent them killing somebody on a wellness check. All it do is create a snuff film.
yeah, I don't think they even care half the time. I think like the cops that murdered Tyree Nichols in Memphis, it was reported today that they took pictures and sent it to their friends.
It's and then
They,
as
they don't care. They weren't exactly like shy and stoating about like hiding away with Sandra Birchmore. You know, they hung out with her in public, like you know. They don't give a shit. They shot this woman. They shot this woman in Easton, Massachusetts, you know,
and what
on a Sunday afternoon.
they
That
released her.
that her family called for help. She had taken I read somewhere she had taken an overdose of insulin. And if that's the case, that can, you know, and you're right, it's changing, like, and it's never in the cops' favor with the story. It's like, you know, oh, there was a weapon. Well, no, actually, it really wasn't. It was just a BB gun, kind of air rifle type of thing. Oh,
But they knew
well,
going into it, it was somebody that was possibly in crisis.
yeah. Oh,
This
they
check
didn't.
implies that, like that's
They
not the right.
rendered a no. They didn't. They waited outside in their cars trying to call her on the phone and didn't even know she was dead for quite some time, I guess. Trying to call her because they didn't want to go in. I mean, come the fuck on, right? I look at it like this: cops, governments are having cops act as social workers without a license to practice, and they're fucking it up everywhere. And rather than admit, gee, we're fucking it up, we probably shouldn't have this shit in our wheelhouse, it's making things worse, they don't. And the reason why is because they want that budget money.
yeah,
That's all.
They want
totally.
that overtime. Yeah. They want their details.
Well,
How
and
they
now
gotta-
they know how much money they can get. Like they have like so much and stuff. Like in Greenfield, the chief there makes $175,000 a year. Greenfield is not a wealthy community. That's a lot of money. And I feel like people, like, again, I always say this on every episode, like go see what the chief of police in your town makes or what they make in general. Like they're afraid of the bottom line being touched in any way. And there are, and I always say this, I say this on a lot of episodes too, like everything you've said about the police, Laura, makes so much sense and is so true. And there are psychological studies that show once you give people those positions of power over others, and put people in cages, or give them, you know, a gun and try to have that be the way that they solve problems, typically it doesn't work out well. It just ends up being really bad. And it's shown here by our own police force without having to even study it. It's just what's happening in America today.
Well,
And
yeah,
we
I
all,
mean,
and we all think it's not going to happen here, but it's happening here.
it is. I mean, Fanning was sitting there across the table from me. I mean, going on about how you know how degenerate these Divine and the Farwells were, and how really predatory and horrible people they were, and they were disgusted. But like, they're still going to prioritize, you know, because like just to them and to the system, someone like poor Sandra, or you know, I don't know about Marianne's family. I mean, she might have, I guess she lived with family members. I don't know a lot about that, but you know, Sandra didn't have anybody. So that's your municipality saying, well, you know, she was so marginalized that it's a shame, but you know, life goes on. Is it really worth ruining him for? Yes, it fucking is.
Yes, absolutely is. It absolutely is.
It is. And I'm done. I'm sick of pretending that it's not. I'm sick of giving these fucking people passes every time they do this shit. It's right up the street. I was sitting on my wall in front of my apartment complex. I saw the SWAT team right by. We thought, oh, this can't be good. But you're exactly right, Spencer. That's exactly what the local politics are going to do. All of the
why
body camera,
I know
training money, and
I know Easton. Why is there a SWAT team? Maybe it was the Mass State Police, but like, why was there a SWAT team?
they have regional. It was a regional kind of SWAT team. And when they do that, I mean, there's feds and everything involved in that. Staties are on that team, members of the local police.
And this is why you can't take down one of them because the other ones will get their back.
Yeah.
It's actually like weirdly, this is kind of off the top of my head thought though. Weirdly, like they're non-hierarchical in their overall organizing, like all the different brotherhoods of police, they're all like they just got each other's back, but there's no giant silo of any of them. And like, the feds aren't directly tied to the local guys, but they have the same interests aligned. So they're, like it doesn't even have to be like a conspiracy. You know what I mean? It's just like
no, they work together here all the time.
Yeah, like the feds need the local cops information or whatever the feds need, like to do their mandate.
They all socialize together. At least around here, they do. They like I don't care what kind of cop they are. I don't care if it's a statey and a fed and some Mansfield, pig or whatever. They all are going to hang out on the same weekends. They're all going to go down to the Cape
and bring their families. And like you said, some of them are brothers. Like I grew up with some boys that, and like all three of them are cops, and they all hang out, like you said. So yeah, it's normal. They usually know. They know what's going on usually with each other.
So this is all enabled by and propaganda, people. It's actually really simple, straightforward, like motivating facts. Like that's why we can say all cops are bad or bastards or pigs or whatever. It's because they all have a common goal of protecting, because otherwise, they're protecting their interests. They get paid a little bit more to punch down on their fellow working class people, whereas they would be making 30% less doing my job out of the gate.
Yep.
And then
they're very self-centered. Like, there's
other ways to double dip. Like we talk about double dipping on social media. That's like the millennial Gen Z approach. And then there's the other ways, the road details, the whatever, their ways of getting extra money, and then the federal programs and grants. It's all the line in their pockets. It's actually
the programs where the municipalities have the cops acting as social workers without a license.
That too, yeah,
practicing without a license.
And then
they have like some mental health provider that they have contracted through some place in Framingham that'll take calls. So they say they're acting and it is the most messed up shit. And this poor woman is now dead. She's now dead.
In the Boston Globe's initial headline on it was the most passive voice officer involved shooting. It was actually even worse than saying officer involved, like wellness check, woman is now dead, basically.
Yeah.
And like it's so callous and cruel. It's like, well, we took care of that crazy person.
I bet you the people that write those articles about this particular murder, this is just what I was thinking. I mean, it's just my opinion. Take it for what you think. That this particular murder, I think a lot of the press was like, oh, if this happened in, say, Brockton or maybe South Attleboro or Pawtucket or Central Falls, they wouldn't even really report it, or they'd report it as, they'd make fun of her kind of, you know what I mean? But with this woman, it was, Easton's a pretty wealthy suburb. There's a lot of money in Easton. It's and the same thing with Sanderstown. Stoughton, there's money in Stoughton. Stoughton is a very upper middle class kind of liberal, more of a liberal area. Easton is more conservative, but same income bracket. And I'm sure that when this happened, they were kind of horrified. They're going to have to report on it, but they're going to have to, because you're not going to be able to shoot somebody in friggin' Easton and not have everybody talking about it. Where they can ignore that in more marginalized communities, they do a lot of the times. But with this one, that was the first thought that came to my mind. The Globe probably struggled with that. Ooh, how do we put this out there? I bet they knew more than, quicker than what they published. And they probably struggle with how to report it because they want to give the cops the benefit of the doubt. But this really does have to stop. The SROs have to stop. Cops acting as social workers has to stop. The mentoring programs, none of it is good. It's all harmful. None of it contributes anything good to anyone. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
And I wish these people would know, bring us full circle. I wish these people that end up falling into the military or the police, that you're being taken advantage of. You're like, I'm not saying you're a victim because you make a choice, but like, you're being taken advantage of, and it is a toxic elixir of power. So I will I personally can see the humanity. I don't accept it. It pisses me off. So they're going to have to deal with the fact that they piss me off just the way they move through the world. But that's the only punishment and consequence they get from me. I'm just pissed off at you. Like that doesn't hurt nobody. Maybe your feelings, but anyways, so it's hard to, we're all workers here. Like they are our, they should be aligned with us as people, but they make the devil's choice. And it's just too bad because like they too want safety and security for their family and their loved ones. I mean, like, let's give them a little moment of like what we share. And it's really unfortunate that they've been lied to and choose to hurt their fellow working class people. I don't know.
I think this is my thought on veterans. And I know because I've been there. I was miserable the second that I got to boot camp. And I remained miserable my entire military career, which wasn't very long. There are people that experience it as a way to get, the poverty draft, the wanting to get the hell out of Dodge. There's that. People look at it as an out. Sometimes when they get there and they experience how horrible it is in the way of life, some of those people can be the most radical people you'll ever meet. They're definitely not a majority of the military, but believe me, they exist. I think that happens where I don't think that happens with police.
Well, they're kind of cowards. They bully.
Yeah.
You're bullying unarmed people when you're in the military. Not like I'm not a military apologist. I am just
No, I hate the military. I hate everything the military stands for.
There
I
is
think some
a
people,
difference of knowing the other people are going to be firing live rounds at you, whereas the cops have the advantage. Most of us aren't going to do that. Like the overwhelming majority of people, and people that are willing to fire on the cops, they've had worse shit happen. Because if like firing at the state
yeah,
is on your register, you've been involved in firefights. I'm just going with odds and my logic here. Like you've already encountered some crazy shit. So, and I bet
it's like
so
I recall like I don't know if it was right before or after Trump got elected or something. West Point had a graduation, and one of the young men at the graduation, when he threw his cap, it said communism will win. And he came out as an open communist. I think that there's propensity for that in the military. Granted, it's not a lot. The only reason that I think that there's propensity for that in the military and not the police is that the military is just so huge. And there's so many fucking people that, that's going to be bound to happen. Have I seen a lot of it? No. Are some of the people that I knew when I was in, some of them are really reactionary friggin' Nazis. Some of them, are pretty radical and,
Well, people are people. People are messy, and
yeah. So it's like, but the structure is the exact fucking same. And if you don't confront it, and I think in your own brain, I think some people can notice it and kind of confront that and go, oh, this isn't for me, and this is how horrible, and this is why I've made a big mistake. And then others who just can't. Others who just can't.
It's tough to unlearn what you've been told and what you've accepted as a perceived reality, and it's real. So, and change is scary, and I don't know.
It is. It's like, and I think a lot of people in the US, like, you grow up kind of indoctrinated, really, right?
Absolutely.
But man, I don't know how anyone would want to go join the police. I really don't. I really don't. We got to do something about this pretty soon, though. Like, I don't care if people have to cop watch them, film them, publicly humiliate them, show up at City Hall with signs all the time, be a general pain in the ass, and make their lives hell.
Well, bring it full circle to the propaganda and Chief Casper and Northampton complaining about morale being low. Good. Gotta keep those numbers. Let's keep those numbers up.
What a baby. I mean, I was reading that. I was like, do you even realize like how pathetic and like poor me you sound?
No, they're
like,
there's no shame.
Yeah.
You can't shame the shameless.
No, it was like you sound like a toddler. And but I think they're really trying to like not say anything about Easton.
Well,
I don't think they're going to be able to keep the lid on that, though, because I mean, she was murdered.
And that's why we call it ghoulery and tomfoolery. So now it's on the radar. We'll come back around to it. I'm sure this will develop, and it'll be another similar, not similar, but another. It's tough to get the information out of the police investigating themselves while it's happening, and you don't know what to believe and who to believe. Well, a la Sandra Birchmore. I mean, it's not the same story, but it's going to be the same process. So,
well, what's really telling, I think, is what Minahane says, is that, and he's kind of, he kind of is okay with cops.
Yeah,
so,
libertarian. So he has
I know he's a
good interviewer.
Ideologically, we're not on the same line, but he did a good job on this investigation.
Talented interviewer, and he has an itch for injustice, and that's kind of his brand. I know who he is enough where I'm like, yeah, I know he's kind of like borderline Joe Rogan, where he's definitely smarter than Joe Rogan, but he he'll be highlighting a problem and walk right past the point. Like the police. It's like, bro, I thought you were a fucking libertarian. Like, I don't understand you. Like, how can you be okay with an authority with guns while you're a libertarian?
Well, here's the thing though, like, I don't have to be the guy's friend or like anything like that, but he did a good job on this reporting on Sandra, and I think he came to like a lot of the same conclusions I did. However, what was telling about, he talked about his investigating and why he was giving up. He said if he heard anything, of course he'd report on it, but he couldn't see he was going to get any more information because, I'd be talking to cops about this and they were really like just on the verge of giving me some information or telling me something. And they go, oh, no, wait a minute. I can't. He's like, every time.
The wall of silence.
Every time. So it's like, even if they might think these cops went too far, they're not that bothered by it that they're going to do anything to fucking stop it. So fuck them too.
And that's why this is ghouls, and it's tomfoolery because it's the same thing over and over again. And I just want to really thank you for coming on the show, and also sticking around for our segment. And unfortunately, it's in your neck of the woods. You know, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it matters, but it doesn't matter because this is happening in whoever's listening. I guarantee you, it's happening in your neck of the woods.
Oh, it's happening in your town. I don't care where you are. And then that's the thing. A lot of these neoliberals, right? Conservatives and stuff. That's their thing. Oh, it doesn't happen here. That stuff just, it's garish. That would never happen here. Guess what? You know, and it's interesting because right now they're finding out that it does. It's like in their face. This Easton thing isn't, you know, this is what you're hearing about in national news.
Right.
In Easton.
Yeah. You're gonna be on CNN.
Yeah.
Not for a good reason.
No.
But they won't stay on it long because once they don't stick with that stuff on CNN. But that's what we do here at the Weed Out. So like everybody who's listening, I just want to like thank you for sticking around and talking to listening to us talk with Laura, Laura Saylor of the Workingers Party. And please go to our website, weedout.com, and all our social medias, all the things, to check out any resources that were mentioned during this. Definitely look for Laura online, at least through the Workers' Party. They are standing up for workers' rights, and their agenda and policies are listed on their website. So we'll definitely share the links to all that. Again, I want to thank Laura for coming on and telling us their.
Thanks for having me. Thank you so much.
And, yes, thank you so much.
Did you have any final thoughts?
Nope, you guys have covered a lot of the things I feel.
Yeah.
It does start to feel like a spiral, you know what I mean? It's like
I'm glad I'm not the only one who's like, listen, I'm just fucking done with all of this.
Yeah, I completely agree with that sentiment. So thank you, Laura, and it's a horrible place to be, but I'm glad to not be there alone. And I think I consistently meet more and more people like us, and thank you. Like, it's just thank you for sharing and being loud about it, because I think people are still, because of the indoctrination and everything we've talked about, I think it's still hard for some people, shockingly to me. And so that's why just the more we talk about these things, the better, I think.
The more we talk about it, the better. And the quicker that they realize it, the better. Because, you know, newsflash, this is like right here, a murder.
Right here in your backyard.
A young woman trafficked and found dead.
Exactly.
By a gang.
Mind your own
by
garden.
a gang who's not facing consequences right in your backyard.
We have our garden to upkeep, you know. You gotta
I mean, I think that's a hurdle we need to overcome, and quick, or it's gonna be really bad and just gonna get worse.
And I think I'm gonna say this. I think we're stealing something you just said, and I'm gonna start signing the show off with it, at least for now, and I'm fucking done with it. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in to our conversation. And I guess that's it. We're fucking done with it. Until next time.
All right. I'm fucking done with it. I'm gonna go get my laundry and get ready for work tomorrow. Thanks for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it.
You too.
And we'll talk soon.
Take care.
Take care.